I want to start by thanking Steve because he really did spark a very unusual exploration through the ideas you shared that led me to this. And it's really come to be a theme that I want to explore and invest more fully in. So thank you, all of you. And by the way, thank you to all of you I've had the pleasure of meeting before for kind of letting me do this kind of wacky stuff I love to do and helping me learn from the experience of sharing it with you, hearing your feedback, and so forth. And with that, away we go. So order and chaos is the theme of what we're going to explore today, very specifically through the lens of the hemispheres of the brain. Let's start with Western civilization, a force that arguably has influenced the modern world more than any other, and that influence begins with the ancient Greeks. Around the 6th century BCE and continuing through the beginning of the modern era, Greek philosophers changed the way the world would come to look at math, science, philosophy, architecture, astronomy, medicine, literature, theater, and even our concept of thought. Logic, analysis, and reason, very specifically evidence-based, conclusive reason, the things you can prove. Principles that name, define, and put boundaries around both physical phenomena and human experience. Systems that categorize and classify. Conventions for ordering words and thought. Ancient Greece harnessed the power of mind to make sense of the swirling forces of the physical realm and the equally mysterious realm of the human mind. The rise of Greek philosophy is the rise of order, pursuing reason, elevating a godlike world of inarguable truth, and through the then novel concept that man, made in the image of God, should have dominion over the earth and its inhabitants, the Greeks thought to defy and even conquer the ambiguity and chaos of the natural world. We get the word chaos from the Greeks, whose deity Chaos, with a K, represented a dark and fearful world of emptiness, abyss, destruction, and dissolution, a place beyond control. And chaos sparked the dawn of ancient Greece. Before the philosophy that shaped the modern world arose was the Neolithic era in human history, and Neolithic Greece was the jewel of the Bronze Age. Spanning the Mediterranean basin, so southern Europe and today's Middle East and North Africa, Neolithic Greece was a flourishing hub of innovation, stability, and cooperative exchange. Peaceful and innovative, its advances in metallurgy, medicine, agriculture, politics, and even sport transformed the stability and quality of human life. Innovation served the greater good. Huge public buildings and everyday homes, roads and waterways, inventions for medical and dental care, improvements in agriculture and the preparation of food. Archaeology reveals a blossoming of ingenuity, improving the quality of life for all, female and male, privileged and humble, able-bodied and even the helpless during this time. The arts flourished. I'll call out to Jody. This, my dear, is a mural from ancient Greece. Jody's a muralist who'll be sharing her art with us tomorrow. But these told the stories of the time through mosaic and frescoes. And murals of daily life show there was ample time for creativity, celebration, and leisure. These murals also document the peaceful, egalitarian nature of a society, guided equally by women and men, working together, side by side, to elevate the quality of life for all. Yet chaos, with a K, put an end to that. Unpredictable geophysical events, massive volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and tidal waves battered the region for centuries. This here is the island of Crete, a hub of the Neolithic Minoan world, before and after one mass-scale eruption. Entire communities were destroyed, crops failed, disease struck and spread, and marauders flooded in, invaders who pillaged and exploited the culture's advances to gain power of their own. Now, as we all know, the Greeks fought back. War became a constant for centuries as a population united not in creating a better life for all, but in defending what they had once created. These ongoing battles and the intelligence that won them changed more than the history of ancient Greece. They changed the way Greek society had to think in order to survive. The Greek mindset shifted from one of coexistence in a flourishing world to one of strategy, hierarchical organization, and a goal-oriented drive to fight and win. That mindset prevailed, The Greeks emerged from millennia of hardship with a new worldview, one where reason, linear thought, and the pursuit of knowledge granted them dominion over a world and a triumphant place in the earthly hierarchy of life. Now, we owe much to those ancient Greeks. They were the cornerstone of the axial age, that globally transformative period between about 7000 BCE and 2000 BCE that shifted the intellectual, philosophical, and religious frameworks of human thought and experience. Axial shifts occurred across the world. Sages and metaphysicians in India, North Africa, the Middle East, and very much the Americas. What a wonderful moment for that bell to ring. We got it. Okay, and the Americas, including people, indigenous people, inhabiting the very land we stand on today, brought new meaning to their lived experience through beliefs and practices that framed their worlds. Aboriginal clans in Australia and ancient societies across Africa generated new social systems, spoken wisdom, and rituals at this time. The axial age was a unique blossoming of new ways of understanding life and our place in the universe, emerging in different ways across global societies. In Asia, a school of Chinese philosophers began to shape their own ways of mastering human experience, seeking order in the unpredictability of life by organizing a system of balance with and submission to the divine forces, the way of the Tao. In contrast to the Greeks, who put man at the top of every earthly hierarchy and who strove to master the earth and her beings, Taoists humbly placed themselves amidst the unending swirl of vast universal cycles and forces, with mastery coming from acceptance of and even surrender to the unpredictability inherent in simply being. This was the Taoist way, the path of balance and equilibrium, submission to the ever-shifting nature of reality that was inherently complete, perfect, and divine. In Taoist thinking, humans were not the highest expression of creation, yet merely part of it. Our role as a species was not to dominate or even to make sense of reality's unspeakable force, but simply to find a home in it. The purpose of life was to cultivate non-judgment, detachment from external events, mastery of the internal experience, the acceptance of a middle way, living in the inherent, and we don't really have words for this in English, but the inherent isness of an ever-shifting reality. Taoism acknowledged and even revered the constant transformational flux of the universe in all of its mystery and power. To practice Taoism was to find internal peace and even a sense of immortality amidst external chaos, secure in knowing that all things, including ourselves, emerge from chaos and systemically return to order, emerge from and return to the Tao, the divine, in an eternal ebb and flow. This, we all know, is the symbol of the Tao, yin-yang, two paisley-shaped forms, each possessing a dot of the other, with that line between, the chiasma, representing the balanced Taoist way. That chiasma represents equilibrium between two complementary, not opposing forces, and the mastery attained through acceptance of the ever-evolving reality they unendingly co-create. White yang is the masculine drive for temporal and linear achievement, beginnings, consumption of energy, noise and attention, strivings for possession and status, attracting more attention, authoritarianism, competing and winning. Yin, in black, is the unending female vortex of possibility, creativity, destruction, expansion, stillness and quiet, non-attachment, systemic connection, nighttime, the unknown, decadence, and renewal. Both were essential in the Taoist world. As it was written, existence is the unity of equilibrium and imbalance, stability and variation, order and disorder. Neither ultimate order nor ultimate chaos can be sustained. Either alone means annihilation. Taoism shaped Eastern civilization as profoundly as Greek philosophy shaped the Western world. Our futures were forever changed by these two radically different mindsets. And so, perhaps, were our brains. Let's look at this through the lens of neuroscience. Like the Taoist yang and yin, the human brain is made up of two complementary hemispheres, the left and the right. They are not opposing forces and not, as some claim, separate and independent brains. They are complementary, anatomically connected partners capable of generating a vast realm of experience and thought. They are joined by their own chiasma, the corpus callosum, a superconnector enabling the exchange of signals and impulses between the halves. They're also connected by a variety of connective glial cells, glial means glue, that direct and speed signals from one region to another. Forget those old charts you've seen about left brain being all mathy and sciencey and the right being all creative and arty. We were misled. Yes, fMRIs captured activity in the left hemisphere when subjects processed problem solving, things that required memorized answers, fill in the blanks, pin the tail on the donkey, categorization, and even association of complex problems with specific labels or words. But that doesn't mean the actual problem solving was confined to the left hemisphere. Things lit up on the left when it came to categorizing, solving, or naming the solutions to various problems, which didn't necessarily indicate where the problems themselves were actually being solved. Increasingly, the left hemisphere is showing itself as the labeler or definer of thoughts that originate across the entire brain. It's the part that creates order, categorizing thought, and assigning words, numbers, and classifications to it. The left hemisphere seems to order our cognition, selecting for probabilities based on past experience and constraining thoughts to things that can be structured, matched, or associated with numbers or words. The left hemisphere helps make sense of things like time and space, defining and quantifying it so it can be navigated. It helps translate experience into words and concepts that we can share with others or decide how to act on. It helps us reason, and it creates a sense of the individual self. This is very important. The individual self is housed in the left hemisphere, one separate from larger systems or even from shared experience. This is the self that seeks to accomplish, to win, to gain status, to be better or faster or more right, rather than to optimize for the holistic or collective good. Biologically, and through our personal and inherited conditioning, the left hemisphere of the brain is effectively the yang, the driver of order and dominion and linear thought, pursuing a goal of individual win and gain. Its yin is the right hemisphere, increasingly understood as the realm of vast and even transpersonal connection, unconstrained yet undefined thought, pure potential, ready and waiting to be made actionable. Now, those Taoists were onto something, by the way. The left hemisphere has more androgen transmitters, the hormone associated with male reproductive functions, and the right has more estrogen in all brains, male and female, driving the hormone that drives female reproductive cycles. We have all of us have both the yin and the yang in us. In the right hemisphere, we form complex contextual thought. We visualize concepts, sensing them, even without words to understand them, and we generate emotional understanding. We envision a range of solutions to problems that the left brain will select from. It's the home of original thought, of feelings without names, and perhaps even of connection to a spiritual and intuitive landscape that's as much our birthright as the vast computational power of its left side partner. Although, as the saying goes, it has no words to describe that. Together, they span the profound landscape of potential human experience, perception, and thought. Now, here's a simple exercise that lets you sense the workings of each hemispheres. Let's begin with the left. Answer this question in your head. What's 10 times 10? Great. Now, without actually thinking, your brain generated a label, 100, associated with the conceptual answer. Very easy left brain activity. But now try this. Imagine your favorite niece or nephew. See them, visualize them. How would you guide them to understand solving the question, what's 10 times 10? There, in a slower mode of thought, you likely felt a sense of the right's power before it handed things off to the left brain to put thoughts to words. There's another way to try it. You can feel the difference when you identify these words. Go ahead and read the color names. Yeah. This common test lets you experience the cognitive tax paid as the right hemisphere senses a color, and the right hemisphere, as the right hemisphere senses a color, and the left hemisphere attempts to override that sense and label it with a different word. It's kind of interesting, huh? Now, a fact about the brain is that it tends to lose what it doesn't use, and it wires or synaptically activates and strengthens what it fires. Brains have vast capacity, yet not limitless. For efficiency, they continually update themselves to do more of whatever they're called on to do. They form shortcuts. We call these biases, so we can think fast, practically without thinking, activating our most familiar and conditioned synaptic paths, even when they're inaccurate. Also for efficiency, what isn't used gets deprioritized, becoming more difficult to access or engage. What's more frequently called upon becomes the brain's go-to, its snap reaction, its easiest path to making sense of the world through familiar shortcuts, hardwired patterns, and learned associations. Now, this can be a reversible process. Thank you, neurogenesis. And as Kim, are you in the audience? She may not be. As Kim from Dent would be happy to discuss with you, because she, like me, is a fan of a fantastic book called The Brain That Changes Itself. The brain can indeed reinvent itself, at least up to a point. Yet the brain we use becomes the mind we have, and this is both an individual and a multi-generational process. We can inherit memory and even trauma, and we can, I've come to believe, etch away cognitive functions and capacity through both individual conditioning and something like a collective forgetting, a concept I plan to explore more. The Greek philosophers cultivated and emphasized the attributes of the left hemisphere, accelerating the rise of the individual and the inherent separation from and superiority to all else in our earthly system. While the Taoists balanced complementary forces, walking the chiasma between the swirling, unnamed potential of the right hemisphere, with enough left hemisphere structure to find calm within the storms, order in the unpredictable. Each of these systems collectively and individually changed, quite literally, the minds of the people who practiced them. And the left hemisphere nature of Greek thought has indelibly marked the Western world today. Over the centuries and with accelerating speed, we have pursued a reliance on evidence and materialism to guide our world, collectively disdaining the intuitive, mystical, and even experiential phenomena. We've shifted our minds and values away from connection with the uncontrollable vast and toward an ideal of dominion over the earth and its potential. Dismissively or even actively, we've degraded the concept of yin, symbolized in Western culture by the feminine, and even the 50% of the 50-something percent of the population who embodies it. The rational nature of our left hemispheres has come to judge that which can't be evidenced or classified, discarding what might be essential forms of human intelligence. This was a deliberate process in Greece. An essential step toward a new future shaped by reason was the repudiation of a past built on concepts of the goddess, the giver of life, both the earth herself and the people who embodied her fertility. In what might have been history's first cancel culture, ancient Greece for centuries repressed both the symbols and the embodiments of the female in their society, downgrading women to the lowest status and disdaining, even destroying, the traditions of worship, healing, ritual, divinity, and community associated with feminine intelligence. Did I hear a hallelujah? As their dominion gained force, it shifted the Western mind and our future course away from equality and integration, both of people and of mind, and toward a new interpretation of the divine, a literal, rational, male, left hemisphere concept of reality and even God. If you listen to Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor, a Harvard neuroanatomist leading the search for the neurocorrelates of schizophrenia and other mental illnesses, who, in the prime of her career, awoke one morning to find her left hemisphere being obliterated by a massive stroke, a unique insight emerges. Without a left hemisphere, Dr. Jill had no way to continue her work, no way to find words to express thoughts or experience, or even to associate the things she needed and wanted to do, eat, get dressed, walk across the street, with any way to put these impulses to action. She was helpless in the way an infant is helpless, sensing she had needs, yet having no idea what to do about them. Yet she found herself floating in a luminous, blissful state that filled her with peace and love. My perception of physical boundaries was no longer limited to where my skin met air, she recalled. She felt no pain as her body disconnected from her mind. I felt like a genie liberated from its bottle. The energy of my spirit seemed to flow like a great whale, sliding through a sea of silent euphoria. Yet something changed. Deep into her recovery, she found herself, I beg your pardon, I missed a spot, but I do remember it. She committed to an 8-year journey of recovering the capacity of her left hemisphere. And during that time, all she could do was work, beginning like a child again, to learn how to rebuild the synaptic connections to the left. Yet something changed while she was on that path. Deep into her recovery, she found herself at a point where a new clarity emerged. She no longer wanted her full left hemisphere back as the driving force of her pre-stroke life. Foregoing a legendary career, she chose a new way, one of whole brain living, a balanced approach her prior mental maps could never have delivered. Now she shared her hemispheric journey through one of TED's most celebrated talks. Has anyone seen it? Nice, good. And through 2 best-selling books about her experience. Well, here's the slide. I'm in backwards order here, so my bad. But we covered it. We're all good. Oh, one thing she wanted to do, she wanted to get back on that fast track at Harvard. She was a star there, but she realized it wasn't worth it. There is more to life, and I don't want that old way back. So one thing I want to mention is I've put Jill's and other resources into an online guide to this talk. It's still a little bit work in progress. I have a few things to add, but I'll share the URL in a few moments so you can reference and research anything that you liked about this conversation. Similarly, Scottish scholar, psychiatrist, and philosopher Dr. Ian McGilchrist arrived at a similar conclusion through decades of medical practice and literary exploration. His research led him to see the ever-increasing Western pursuit of left hemisphere logic and reason at the expense of a unified mental, cognitive, and spiritual experience as being the curse of the modern world. Dr. Alison Gopnik, a research psychologist and speaker at our very first Dent, I apologize, a little glitch in the slides here. Thank you for future editors. A research psychologist and speaker at our very first Dent. You remember that, right, Steve? Yeah. Echoes the theme in her studies of early childhood development and the shift of perception in the first years of life when we begin to associate our sense and our observation of the world with learned judgments and labels, narrowing our curious, unbridled, deeply connected lantern vision to the torch vision or spotlight vision of adult life. With learned judgments and labels, we narrow that curious. I find all of this aligned with a thesis that Monica Guzman, is she in the audience? That Monica shares as she explores the rise of polarization and outrage at a time that seems less open, less curious, and more oppositional than any of us would wish to experience. Speaking personally, as someone who was a highly intuitive child and who experienced, to my parents' understandable concern, many visual and auditory events that could not be explained by the prevailing rules of reason. In other words, I heard and saw things that defied the order of an acceptable reality, yet somehow turned out to be true. I know what it's like to dial down a lantern vision and agree to an ordinary world of approved, categorized, socially acceptable thought, even as I longed for that other realm. And as someone fascinated by the research around psychedelics, especially plant medicine traditions in non-Western cultures, I increasingly sense that the systems we've inherited from the Greeks effectively decommission our access to vast realms of intelligence that may be exactly what's needed to restore balance in our minds and even in the world beyond them today. Now, I've taken you on quite a journey, and I thank you for letting me organize and put words to concepts that have been swirling in my right hemisphere for quite some time. They lead me to wonder about the price we've all paid for this life of reason and the impact our commitment to this path has had on our world. We are out of balance. We know it, and we feel it. The path we are on looks increasingly unsustainable. Is there something of a recultivation of a more integrated brain that can guide us to the solutions we need? Now, before we go to the easy reaction of, and abandon all we've accomplished as we've pursued order and reason, remember that judgment and reactivity are attributes of that left hemisphere, the one we seem to fire and wire most in the Western world. Monica, I'm sure you're nodding. Yes, you are. Nodding along as you hear that. So, get curious. Sit with the uncomfortable possibility that we may not be thinking as fully as we could or should. Consider, if only to strengthen beliefs you already hold, that axial age began just 300 generations ago and ended only 100 generations ago. That thought gives me hope, and here's why. I'm not saying it was simple or idyllic, yet still, we survived 75,000 generations of human sapiens using an intelligence that arose in harmony with the planet, not in the conquest to dominate it through a life of reason. 75,000 generations. You sitting here today are the product of those 75,000 generations of hominids who found a way to survive in harmony with the forces of nature, space, and time, subordinate to a greater reality and inherently part of it. Your innumerable ancestors survived and even prospered using a very different type of intelligence, one that listened to the natural world, fit into its order and its chaos, and found balance between the essential forces of left and right, yin and yang. Maybe there's a lesson there and an invitation to reawaken the capacities of the right hemisphere. Perhaps you're noticing a rising interest in phenomena beyond conventional reason, deeper explorations of consciousness and human experience, far beyond those we might have accepted even a few years back. Many paths are available to all of us. Any meditation or reflective practice helps challenge conditioned brain patterns, especially those of a left hemisphere dominant mind. If you heard that and thought, but I'm a bad meditator, or I tried meditating, but I kept thinking things, thank your left hemisphere. That's exactly the point of meditation, to holistically observe the brain's tendency to randomly generate and judge mental phenomena, to accept that and to practice softening that tendency. As spaciousness opens in the mind, the right hemisphere awakens and comes online, bringing new experiences of clarity, integration, and even peace. Time in nature, simply spacing out and observing curiously without needing to label or classify anything about the experience. That is right hemisphere brain candy. Now, there's probably some Shazam-like app for identifying birdsong. Leave that behind. Feel what it's like to simply be, with no need to make sense or identify what's happening. It might seem hard at first or out of practice. That's okay. You'll learn a lot simply by disconnecting from the familiar ways and activating the formless potential of the right. Explore the concept of drawing on the right side of the brain, an artistic process that decouples what we see in the sensing sense from the tendency to separate, classify, and label visual phenomena. These two drawings were completed by the same artist 4 days apart, using right-side techniques. The left was done in the usual way, illustrations of separate parts, ears, eyes, profile, etc., to create the image. On the right is what happened as that artist conceptualized space, captured light and shadow, and explored contour. Pretty big difference, right? Learning from those who have explored psychedelic experience is also an illuminating path. I highly recommend Aldous Huxley's The Doors of Perception for its vivid description of a world freed from literal identification and intrinsically connected to a realm of awe and wonder. Michael Pollan, too, offers excellent learning. For those who haven't used psychedelics, reading his work, I'm told, is almost like being there. Research into the therapeutic use of psilocybin and related substances show a profound increase in right-left brain integration, especially for patients who have experienced trauma or certain mental health challenges. Even reading about this in my O activates some worthy pathways. So I've linked a few articles in the guide I mentioned. It's tinyurl.com, EPL Dent, left, right. And I'll put this on the Slack later, so don't worry about that. But there's one more thing I want to share. One of the great minds of recent history offered us this thought. The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. That's attributed to Einstein, as you probably know. We uphold Einstein's mathematical genius, yet often forget his deep grounding in philosophy and metaphysics, concepts he cultivated throughout his life. Young Albert literally ran away from a school he felt was too structured, too ordered, and not sufficiently conducive to imagination. He preferred time playing violin to the forced memorizations his education required, and spent so much time daydreaming that his parents and his teachers worried about his future. His early thought experiments, mind games he played to see solutions to complex problems, have him visualizing what it would look like to fly alongside a beam of light and how the beam's speed would change when measured from different positions. Even as his fame and influence rose, he worried about the materialism he saw shaping the tone of science, even in his own lifetime. He lost debates, important ones, because he refused to pin answers on questions he felt weren't fully considered. He bemoaned his peer community's obsession with the mechanistic, only that which could be directly observed, measured, and proven, even when their evidence revealed contradictions and mysteries they dismissed rather than continue questioning. So it's probably no surprise that his brain, when autopsied, turned out to be as much of an outlier as the man himself. It had an unusually dense corpus callosum, that superconnector that exchanges information across the hemispheres, and what some count as a 17x concentration of a special long glial cell, facilitating chemical and electric exchanges across regions of his cortex. There were other aberrations too, including one that suggests a suppression of individualistic thought, but that's a topic for another day. What I leave you with now is a question, one to be genuinely curious about, to reflect on, and maybe even let settle into your right hemisphere without words to describe it or limit it, to experience the curiosity. Did any of what you heard today feel, not in a thinking way, but more in a felt way, like it made sense? If so, perhaps you accessed a glimmer of your most sacred gift, that potential for balance and equanimity amidst the chaos of life. Activate that glimmer, fire it, and wire it. Your brain and you are more than what you've been told and taught. Use this time at Dent to remind yourself of that and decide what gifts beyond reason can guide you on your journey as part of a mysterious and meaningful life experience, one that balances your gifts of reason and knowledge and brings more truth, more possibility, and perhaps even more sustainability to the world. I've put here, and I'll add to the Slack, let's connect. I do plan to explore this concept further, and I'd love to share it with you. And then truly, as always, beautiful Dent family, thank you.